Marco Vitali hadn't slept through the night in 12 years. Not since he became the man other men feared. Not since he built an empire from blood and silence and loyalty bought with cold cash. So when the phone vibrated against the marble table in his empty penthouse, he was already awake, staring at the city lights below like a king surveying a kingdom he never wanted. The number was unknown. He almost didn't answer, but something in his chest, something he thought had died long ago, made him press the phone to his ear. Marco! Her voice. 7 years had passed since he last heard it. 7 years since she walked out of his life, tears streaming down her face, telling him she couldn't love a monster. 7 years since Elena Caruso disappeared into the night, taking his heart with her. Elena! Her breathing was shallow, labored. The sound of machines hummed in the background, the unmistakable rhythm of a hospital ward. I'm dying, Marco. The words hit him like a bullet he never saw coming. Where are you? St. Catherine's. Room 412. A pause. A sob she tried to swallow. There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago. Please. I don't have much time. The line went dead. Marco stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then he grabbed his coat and ran. The man he became. 12 years earlier, Marco Vitali had been nobody. A boy from the wrong neighborhood. A son of a father who drank too much and a mother who prayed too hard. He grew up knowing hunger like an old friend, knowing violence like a language spoken in every dark alley. By 18, he was running errands for the Benedetti family. By 22, he was their most trusted soldier. By 28, he had taken over everything. They called him Il Silenzio, the silence, because Marco Vitali didn't threaten. He didn't shout. He simply looked at a man with those cold gray eyes, and that man understood that his life could end with a single nod. He built an empire that stretched across the city. Gambling, money laundering, protection. He never touched drugs. He had watched addiction destroy his father, but everything else was fair game. And in his rise to power, he lost everything that made him human. His mother died while he was in a meeting. He didn't make it to the hospital in time. His brother Giovanni turned against him, tried to steal his territory, and Marco did what had to be done. He didn't pull the trigger himself, but he gave the order, and Giovanni was buried in an unmarked grave near the river. After that, Marco stopped feeling. He lived in a penthouse worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, but he slept alone. He commanded an army of loyal men, but he had no friends. He had power, respect, fear, but not a single person in the world who loved him. Until Elena. She was a nurse at a free clinic on the south side of the city. Marco had gone there after a deal went wrong. A knife wound to the shoulder that he couldn't take to a real hospital. Too many questions. Too many records. Elena cleaned the wound without flinching. She didn't ask questions. She didn't look at him with fear or fascination. She simply worked, her hands steady and warm. You should be more careful, she said softly, wrapping the bandage. I'm always careful. She looked up at him then. Brown eyes. Deep and honest. No, you're not. People who are careful don't get stabbed. He almost smiled. He hadn't smiled in years. Something began that night. Something neither of them expected. For 2 years, Elena was his secret. His sanctuary. The one person who saw past the monster to the man beneath. She never asked about his work. She never judged. She simply loved him wholly, completely, in a way no one had since his mother. But love wasn't enough. I can't do this anymore, she said one night, standing in his penthouse, her suitcase packed. I can't love someone who has blood on his hands. I can't raise. She stopped herself. Raise what? Marco asked. Nothing. Tears fell. I just can't, Marco. I'm sorry. I have to go. He let her. It was the greatest mistake of his life. The hospital. Marco's car tore through the rain-soaked streets. Red lights meant nothing. Speed limits were suggestions. His driver, Enzo, had been with him for 20 years and had never seen his boss like this. Desperate, shattered, human. St. Catherine's Hospital rose from the darkness like a ghost. Marco didn't wait for Enzo to park. He threw open the door and ran through the rain, his suit soaking through in seconds. The elevator was too slow. He took the stairs, 3 at a time, his heart pounding against his ribs. Room 412. He stopped at the door. Through the small window he could see her. Elena. Thin. Pale. Wires and tubes connected to her body like chains holding her to a world that was already letting go. And then he heard it. A cry. Small. Fragile. The unmistakable sound of a newborn. Marco pushed open the door. Elena's eyes found him immediately. Even in death's shadow, she was beautiful. But her beauty was fading, her skin too white, her lips too dry, her breath too shallow. You came, she whispered. I came. Look. She turned her head toward the corner of the room. A hospital bassinet stood near the window. Inside, wrapped in a pink blanket, was a baby girl. Tiny fists waving. Dark hair, his hair. And when her eyes opened for a moment, Marco saw them. Gray. His mother's eyes. His eyes. She's yours, Elena said. Our daughter. I named her Lucia. After your mother. The world stopped. Marco couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. He stared at the baby, his baby, and felt something crack open inside him. Something he thought had turned to stone long ago. Why? His voice broke. Why didn't you tell me? Elena's tears fell freely now. Because I was scared, Marco. Scared of what you were. Scared of what she might become. She coughed, a wet, terrible sound. I wanted to protect her from your world. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. She reached for his hand. Her grip was weak. Fading. I'm dying, Marco. Cancer. They found it too late. Another cough. I have no one else. No family. No one to take care of her. You're the only one. Marco knelt beside her bed. For the first time in 12 years, tears streamed down his face. I don't know how to be a father, he whispered. I don't know how to love. Yes, you do. Elena smiled through her pain. You just forgot. Let her remind you. She died at 4:23 in the morning. The machines flatlined. The nurses rushed in. But Marco didn't move. He held her hand until it went cold, until the warmth drained from her fingers, until the woman he loved was gone forever. And then Lucia cried. The sound pulled him from his grief. He stood on shaking legs and walked to the bassinet. The baby looked up at him. This tiny creature, so fragile, so innocent, so completely unaware of the monster standing over her. Marco reached down and picked her up. She weighed almost nothing, but in his arms, she felt like everything. I've got you, he whispered. I've got you. The war within. Marco brought Lucia home to the penthouse. For the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do. He hired a nurse, a kind woman named Rosa who didn't ask questions and handled Lucia with gentle expertise. But even with Rosa's help, Marco was lost. He didn't know how to hold a bottle. He didn't know what different cries meant. He didn't know anything about being a father. But he stayed. He watched. He learned. And slowly something began to change. The first time Lucia smiled at him, Marco felt something bloom in his chest, a warmth he hadn't known since childhood. He found himself talking to her, telling her about the view from the window, about the rain, about her grandmother whose name she carried. "Your grandmother was a good woman," he whispered one night, cradling Lucia in his arms. "Better than I deserve. Better than this world allowed." He paused. "I'm going to try to be better. For you." But the world he lived in didn't allow for change. Word spread quickly. The feared mafia boss had a daughter. His enemies saw opportunity. His allies saw weakness. And those closest to him saw a man becoming soft. "This is dangerous," said Dante, his second in command. A man who had been with Marco since the beginning. "The baby changes things. People are talking. Let them talk." "Marco." Dante stepped closer. "The Ricci family is already making moves. They see you distracted. They think you're weak." Marco's eyes went cold. "Then remind them why they should be afraid." But even as he said the words, he knew they rang hollow. Because he was afraid. Not of the Ricci family. Not of any enemy. He was afraid of losing Lucia. The attack came 3 weeks later. Marco was at the penthouse with Lucia when his phone rang. Enzo's voice was frantic. "Boss, they hit the warehouse. Ricci's men. They're sending a message." "What message?" "They found out about Rosa. They know where she lives. They know about the baby." Marco's blood turned to ice. He grabbed Lucia from her crib and moved to the secure room, a reinforced space he had built for emergencies. Rosa was already there, trembling. "Stay here," Marco ordered. "Don't open the door for anyone but me." He handed Lucia to Rosa, but his hands lingered. He didn't want to let go. Every instinct screamed at him to stay, to protect his daughter himself. But he knew what he had to do. Marco found Dante waiting in the lobby. "The Ricci family needs to understand," Marco said, his voice cold and steady. "This ends tonight. What's the plan?" Marco looked at his old friend, his brother in war. And in that moment, he saw something flicker in Dante's eyes. Something wrong. "Dante." "Yes, boss." "How did Ricci know about Rosa?" The silence stretched between them, and Marco understood. "It was you," he said quietly. "You told them." Dante's face didn't change, but his hand moved toward his jacket. "You've gone soft, Marco. A baby? A family? That's not who you are. That's not who we need you to be." He pulled out a gun. "The Ricci family offered me a deal. I take over. They leave the baby alone. Everyone wins. Except me. You were already dead. The moment you started loving that child, you died." Marco stared at the gun pointed at his chest. At the man he had trusted for 20 years. At the betrayal he should have seen coming. "You're wrong," Marco said. "I wasn't dead when I started loving her. I was finally alive." Dante pulled the trigger. The price of love. The bullet hit Marco's shoulder, the same shoulder Elena had bandaged years ago, in that little clinic on the south side. He fell back but didn't go down. Enzo appeared from the stairwell, gun drawn. One shot. Dante collapsed. Marco stood over his former friend as blood pooled on the marble floor. "You were right about one thing," Marco said quietly. "I have changed." He turned and walked toward the elevator, his shoulder burning, his heart heavier than it had ever been. The Ricci family expected Marco Vitali to strike back with fury, to wage a bloody war that would tear the city apart. Instead, he did something no one expected. He sat down with Alberto Ricci, an old man with cold eyes and calculating mind, and made a deal. "I'm done," Marco said. The business, the territories, everything. I'm walking away. Ricci laughed. The great Marco Vitali retiring? Because of a baby? Because of a life? One that matters more than all of this. And if I don't accept? Marco leaned forward. His eyes were still cold. His voice was still steady. And even with one arm in a sling, Alberto Ricci felt fear. Then I burn everything down. Your family, my family, all of it. And in the ashes, whoever survives will know that Marco Vitali died protecting his daughter. He paused. But I'd rather live. For her. Ricci studied him for a long moment. And in Marco's eyes, he saw something he hadn't expected. Not weakness. Not surrender. Peace. Walk away, then, Ricci said finally. Take your daughter. Start over. But know this. If you ever return to this world, I will destroy you. I'm not coming back. A new beginning. 6 months later, Marco Vitali was gone. In his place lived a man named Marco Lucia, a quiet man who bought a small house in a coastal town 300 miles from the city. A man who spent his mornings walking on the beach with a baby girl in his arms. A man who smiled more than anyone thought possible. Rosa stayed with them. She had become family now. The grandmother Lucia would never have. The friend Marco desperately needed. And every night, after Lucia fell asleep, Marco sat by her crib and watched her breathe. I don't know if I'll be a good father, he whispered one evening. I don't know if I can protect you from everything, but I promise you this. I will never stop trying. I will never stop loving you. And I will spend every day of my life becoming someone worthy of being your father. Lucia stirred. Her tiny hand reached out and wrapped around his finger. And Marco Vitali, the man who had commanded an empire, who had struck fear into the hearts of thousands, who had thought himself beyond redemption, began to cry. Not from grief, from gratitude. 5 years later, the beach was golden in the morning light. A little girl with dark hair and gray eyes ran across the sand, laughing. Her name was Lucia, and she was 5 years old, and she believed her father was the strongest man in the world. She wasn't wrong. Marco chased after her, pretending to be slow, letting her stay just ahead. When he finally caught her, he scooped her up and spun her around until her laughter echoed across the waves. Again, Papa. Again. One more time, he said, smiling. Then breakfast. He set her down and watched her run toward the water, her tiny feet leaving prints in the wet sand. And for a moment he thought of Elena. He thought of her smile, her warmth, the way she had loved him even when he didn't deserve it. The gift she had left him. Thank you, he whispered to the wind. I'll take care of her. I promise. Lucia turned and waved at him. Come on, Papa. The water's warm. Marco laughed and ran toward his daughter. The sun rose over the ocean. The past faded behind him. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Elena watched over them both. Her love alive in every moment Marco shared with their daughter. He had been a monster once, but love had saved him. Not his own love, he had thought himself incapable of it, but the love given to him freely and without condition. The love of a woman who saw past his sins. The love of a child who didn't know his darkness. And in that love, Marco Vitali found something he never thought possible. He found redemption. He found home. He found himself.